So for our second lesson on the Persian Empire, we're going to do what's called setting the scene. Give a bit more details on the background to the area and who was around before the Persians. Who did the Persians take over from? So we're able to recall who ruled this area before the Persians and try and figure out how similar or different the Persians were to their predecessors. Keywords: Assyrians. Atrocities, doing terrible things in an atrocity, killing people, murdering them, torturing them. Cruelty, control. Tribute, if you make people you conquered give you money or gold or stuff, it's called tribute. Similar to loot, you take their stuff. Neo-Babylonian Empire, Babylon's a city. Babylonian, you're from there. Neo means new, it's a prefix, it means new. So the Neo-Babylonian Empire is the new empire from Babylon. Medes, Median Empire, Media, it's an area. There are people. The Medes are the people. The empire is what they created, and Media is the country. Horsemen, people ride horses. And this LO here, to develop source skills. First time we've talked about this, but by no means the last. In ancient history, we have to study the original sources, even though they're thousands of years old. Often they're not very good. So, quiz on the previous lesson. Read those questions, please. Answer them. If you can't answer them, look at the previous video and figure out the answers. So, before the Persians, in about 900 BC, the Assyrians, in green here, ruled most of this area, the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians were great military power, fantastic armed forces, very advanced. They invented the first recorded historical siege weapons for attacking cities. Very advanced military power, based in the cities of Ashur, and more importantly, their main capital city was Nineveh, and they'd conquered this area. The thing that stands out about the Assyrians is how they treated the people they conquered, how they controlled their empire. They controlled their empire through terror. They were awful to the people they conquered. Here's an Assyrian nobleman dragging slaves around by piercings in their face. Quite a common thing. Treat them like animals. Piles of human heads. Enemies here are being flayed, tied down here, and their skin is being pulled off, peeled off like a banana. The Assyrians committed terrible, keyword, atrocities. Yeah, they're into cruelty. Now, how do we know all this? The Assyrians were not shy about it. If you go to museums like the British Museum, there's lots of Assyrian stuff on the wall from their temples and their cities, and they show pictures. They did these pictures. People being impaled, people being flayed, piles of heads. The Assyrians did all this, and they carved it on the side of their temples. They wanted people to be too afraid to fight back, so they used it as propaganda. But in 612 BC, it all fell apart for them. There was an alliance of two people they'd conquered. The Babylonians and the Medes got together and crushed the Assyrians. They destroyed Nineveh. So much so that for a long time, lots of historians doubted the Assyrian Empire even existed because they didn't know anything about it. They'd read about it, but didn't see any evidence. And only quite about 100 years ago, Nineveh was discovered, the ruins of it in northern Syria. So, the Assyrian Empire split into the Babylonian or Neo-Babylonian Empire and the Medes Empire. First off, Babylon. Babylon is based in an area called Mesopotamia. That bit there, between these two rivers, is Mesopotamia. Babylon's just there. Very fertile land, very good. The water, the rivers there irrigated the land so they grew lots of food. And it's famous, the whole area, Mesopotamia and Babylon, are very famous for being incredibly ancient, what's called the cradle of civilization. The very first proper human civilizations are in this area. The very first cities were built in this area. The first people to write anything down in this area, they had a script, a language called cuneiform. Here it is here, from a museum. This stuff here is older than ancient Egypt. Very advanced, very ancient. Now their partners were the Medes, who are very different. The Medes were horsemen, and they were nomads from Central Asia, a bit like the Persians. In fact, they relate to the Persians. So whereas Babylon was these giant cities, the Medes not so much, more horsemen. They did have some cities, and their capital was at Ecbatana. Now, get on to our actual story today. By the 550s BC, the king of the Medes was Astyages. Here he is here. And amongst the people that he ruled were a little nobody tribe that no one really heard of or cared about, called the Persians. But that was about to change.